What's up? It's VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. Once again, you know what it is. Headspace album reviews. It is said that the setting of the sun represents an ending of current cycles and obviously a fertile jump into the next moment. Sunset is a moment that implies to us that it is an opportunity to rest and find the power of the next day. So if you're going to tell a story and call it sunset stories, then obviously these are narratives that allude to how things fall and the eventual rise of the next moment. This is the title of Jay Jody's latest tape. Now if you don't know who Jay Jody is, think about Benchmark, think about the rise of Ambitious Records, think about Hey Boy Nang, Why You Ndenza. So he was part of the duo which basically were part of a strong army and team which were fundamental pioneers in boosting what is now a clearly lucrative trap wave Mzansi. Here he is solo Khotmanga Aries, and I gotta mention that, and I'm sure he's probably annoyed by being fundamentally known as Aries' big brother now, but it's kind of fittingly profound because when you listen to this project you feel a lot of where Reese's inspiration comes from, and naturally as his older brother I can imagine them in a household with Jay Jody being the one blasting a lot of that 90s era hip hop and Reese kind of taking it in. And it's funny how time works where both of them have this passion for lyricism, both of them have this passion for rapping in a way that's clearly mostly concerned with globalist aspirations. So I can't help but feel that when I listen to this project, I'm listening to an earlier version of Aries. I'm listening to what Aries would have sounded like if he was born in the 90s, like early 90s or like late 80s. It really feels like a lot of what we hear coming into full fruition with Reese is actually what was being in the works with Jay Jody. So in that way, he's kind of the sunset to Aries' sunrise. So how fitting that he kind of puts himself in the context of one who tells stories of a setting in order to rise. How is he rising to the occasion in this project? I want to say one of the most interesting things that I noticed as this project opened up was the song Don't Beg for Love, which pretty much feels like a happy, chirpy, sunshine vibe. You feel the palm trees. It's like being in the shore somewhere in a fancy beach in Cape Town, and yet the message is so goddamn serious. Jay Jody is impeaching us with the help of Boy Wonder saying don't beg for love. The quote directly: love loves you, don't beg for love. Love loves you. What is he saying to us? He's addressing in that moment how we've kind of fallen prey to this need for validation through tropes. Not searching into who we are and what we love about ourselves, but looking for things that are easily lovable and have been presented by the capitalist machine in order that we can fit in neatly into what other people aspire to be. Now it's ironic because I feel the same thing Jay Jody admonishes us not to do is exactly what he finds himself doing, because he starts the album off warning us of the dangers of that in every facet of life. And again, the song itself is kind of like a schizophrenic complementary aspect of how he's warning against the same thing he's doing, because close your eyes and kind of void off and imagine the lyrics aren't there, and this is a song that feels happy, it's filled with possibility, and yet he inserts into it such serious content, and in a way it doesn't quite fully gel. Catchy as it may be, the message just feels like it wouldn't resonate. It feels like if you bump into this in your car, you wouldn't know whether to dance to it or to stop the car and really think about what on earth is going on emotionally. And I think schizophrenic is a great way to describe Jay Jody's project. It's his heart being in a place of telling truthful anecdotes of what he feels we need to understand in our times, and yet he's doing that to the backdrop of played out tropes, capitalistically viable pathways into this typical trap music juncture, and he does it with beats that basically are monotonously painted out through a palette of sunshine and open opportunity and possibility. Sonically, this album sounds like a new day. So I was lost when I was trying to listen to how the sun is exactly rising, because it feels like a lot of what this project sounds like when you listen to it is a sun being in its full motion. It's literally the sun shining and it penetrating on every aspect to an extent where I feel like it burns a little bit. There's so much inauthentic optimism about this project that when you listen to the lyrics, you get lost in what Jay Jody's actually trying to do. There's songs here where he's serenading bitches. There's songs here where he's kind of affirming how long he's been in the game. Just as an OG, just as Kodmanga Aries, quote unquote, but somebody who's loved rap from the time where social media didn't exist. Now again, what does that all culminate and conclude to being? What are we supposed to be getting out of this project? And I feel like what we do end up getting is a man who still wants to take the essence of who he is, but he's trying to conform it to what the generation of today prefer. And in that, he kind of goes against himself, which again opens up to the song that kind of concludes the project, where he says, and I quote on the actual title song, he says, "I know the world is not safe, but I feel like you don't risk enough." Talking to a kind of imaginary figure, talking to an intimate loved one. Then he goes on to say, "But that goes for me too, my nigga." And I think that's a truthful moment where he's pointing out how, quote unquote, "I feel like you don't risk enough. That goes for me too, my nigga." He's speaking in that moment of vulnerability, saying, I feel like we as a people are not taking risks on ourselves. Don't believe in ourselves enough to go out there and do what we want in terms that speak truly to who we are. And then he slips, kind of in a Freudian sense, "That goes for me too." And this project fundamentally outlines that. It's the irony of what he's doing. And I don't know whether it's deliberate. I don't know whether he's showing us that he's doing the same thing that we're doing and thus we're all kind of falling apart. Or there's an unconscious slip of the tongue and a moment where he's beginning to look at himself and seeing how in proximity to market trend and the value of products today and where he stands as a rapper right now, he feels driven to play into the same sound that has garnered so much fame and glory for his brother, who, by the way, dominates the track Purple Rain with some of the most smoothest flows I've heard in a minute. Now, y'all should know, after a lot of reviews that I've done of Reese's projects, I'm not a fan of Reese's whole uninformed context of how he positions himself. There's absolutely very little references to who he is as a South African, but that doesn't mean I don't like Holmes as an MC. He spits and he spits with some of the best, and he shines on this track, really showing us that he's definitely the one holding the team together. But where is this all going? If we're going to subject our authenticity for globalist trends, are we really going to find a place in a world where we don't count for a lot? And this world is the Western imperialist world, the broader colonialist white world. And even though we feel trapped as a pop culture is part of quote unquote black culture is just another aisle in what capitalism is selling to us. But back to Jay Jody's Sunset, and I feel the falling of Jay Jody is exactly that. Him going into the trap sound, him going into something which doesn't really speak for who he is, and possibly trying to rise from that. I think the sun is setting with very little possibilities of it rising, because how can you be reborn if you haven't understand the aspects of you that must die to begin with? And I don't think Jay Jody goes in and examines these aspects of himself that must die in order for him to be reborn as an MC that could, in his own right, validate and demand the same respect in a way that a true MC who wants to tell the narratives of South Africa can. Now, let's go into it structurally. 12 tracks, and there are moments here where his delivery plays so much into a very irksome tendency to actually try to sound American. He doesn't really have the same knack for the twang that his brother has, and as a result it puts him in a very, very interesting place, and I want to talk a little bit about that. A prevalent part of how this project is fundamentally schizophrenic is in fact in the title joint itself, Sunset Stories, where Jay Jody says to us, I know the world is not safe, but I feel like you don't risk enough, almost implying to this kind of intimate figure that he's relaying his vulnerabilities with. And the irony of that, he says, I feel like you don't risk enough, that goes for me too, my nigga. And I think that's a telling tale in the trajectory of this project. Jay Jody, knowingly or unknowingly, understands his own hypocrisy, and whether or not he has the courage to not play into it is an issue that we get to discover probably as his career evolves. But one thing is for certain, he himself victimizes himself to the same tropes that he guards us against in this project, which kind of brings it to the place where it's more of a sun setting into a moment where he is trapped than a sun rising into the possibility of what he could be. Very, very pivotal points in this project that are interesting to note is you have features from Blackie, Marcus Harvey, Toady Mac, who I think what it does, it outlines that we go from the best of the past and the best of the present, and yet still these are not enough as elements to enrich this project with a sense of authenticity. As killer swag as Toady Mac's verse is, which kind of returns it back to an authentic place, it is Jay Jody's insistence on being this kind of old groomed MC who's still playing into young tricks that don't feel like they give him the room to explore himself enough, which makes Sunset Stories the story of an MC and a writer who is setting with the sun and might not be able to rise into a new opportunity of possibility, because he is playing into the tropes of internationalism instead of trying to navigate an authentic place where he could, one, be the narrative storyteller that he so desperately wants to be in this project, yet still give us something of commercial value. Therefore, for me, I ultimately have to give this a 6 out of 10. It inches a little beyond the average mark. It is good enough to become a consumable project in the context of market value, because again, it plays into this shiny and happy sound of trap, which kind of is there as a vehicle into escapism, which feels confused in a lot of the raps which seeks to be reflective. So how do you fully turn up with this album when a lot of it is about kind of turning down and reflecting on yourself? And these two elements of the vocal projection and the stylistic sonic scope don't seem to blend. Another thing, on the vocal projection, Jay Jody's insistence on kind of twanging in ways that don't feel true to his authentic voice is another telling aspect. How, again, on Sunset Stories, there's a pattern which goes comfort me, where he kind of, the way he pronounces comfort and comfort as comfort and comfort is again a telling aspect of how when rappers go into the studio, put their headphones on and put on a voice that they feel is going to open them up to the influences of the world, instead of speaking in the direct way that they do in their everyday existence, it takes away from the authenticity of feeling like you're listening to a person in the ingrained embeddedness of who they are as a person. I mean, come on. Millennial South Africans have interacted with white and whiteness and been in proximity to global culture to the point where a lot of us will have that twang. But there's a difference between sounding like you have a palate that's been satiated for speaking English and sounding like you're putting on an accent that is far removed from who you are. So it's a 6 out of 10 for me. I'm VJ, the brother from the ancient mother, admonishing MCs to understand that the process of the highs and lows is natural. The setting in the sun will come as a catalyst for the rising of the sun. But if we do not know how we're falling we can't possibly know how to rise. And I think that's the case with Jay Jody, a solid MC. But this is a lesson that skill in and of itself, is not enough. Beyond what an MC can do is how they are able to bring themselves across in a way that shows who they really are. So holler at me, you agree with me, you don't, it's the Headspace, South Africa's most poignant hip-hop podcast. I love you.